Every move we make online generates data, from what we buy and what we read, to where we go and how we spend our time. That data is vacuumed up by corporations, and it's used to predict all sorts of things about our daily lives, both now and in the future. So even quite personal information, it's not really ours. For the most part, we don't control what's done with it, or even who has access to it. Whether that's acceptable or not is becoming one of the central questions of our time. Frank McCourt is an American executive and philanthropist. He's also the author of a new book about the internet called Our Biggest Fight: We're Claiming Liberty, Humanity, and Dignity in the Digital Age. He joined me on stage to talk about that fight at a gathering by the responsible tech nonprofit All Tech is Human. I'm Jennifer Strong, and this is Shift.
Now here on the steering column is a device called Auto Cruise. You simply set the speed you want.
Self-driving robo-taxis are already on the road in 2 U.S. cities.
As the disc rotates, a mirror reflects the light in the way that depends on how the signal was recorded.
This is the 100 terabyte I present to you Electro, the Moto Man.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I would say that one of my greatest skills is my ability to interact with humans.
This episode was recorded in front of a live audience in New York City. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And congratulations on the book.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You know, in it, you say the internet is broken. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's start with that first bit. How do you think the internet is broken?
Well, it's broken because we had this awesome piece of technology that was, created, that was decentralized and empowering for individuals, and held so much promise. And about 20 years ago, everything changed. Instead of it being a decentralized, human-centric internet, it became very much a centralized and autocratic and surveillance-based internet. Because of the apps, the big apps that showed up and started to just scrape our data and use it in ways that some were decent, I suppose, but many were not. A lot of harm that's being done, and we wouldn't allow any other utility or infrastructure to do as much harm as this is doing without saying enough is enough and let's just fix this.
Do you mind to spell out the harms from where you sit?
Well, we could spend the rest of the evening talking about the harms, right? We're not blind, right? We all see them, we feel them. Let's talk about the ability to have a functioning democracy. That's kind of hard right now. I mean, we're borderline not governable. So that's a harm. Let's talk about civil discourse. Wouldn't it be nice just to be able to have conversations and be able to kind of come to some kind of consensus and friendly agreement on things, instead of having, school committee meetings that need armed police? Information. Civilization advances based on our ability to gain knowledge and to build out knowledge and understand what facts are and what truth is. And right now we've taken a giant step backward because of mis and disinformation. So we have a very, very polluted and corrupted ecosystem. And then most importantly of all, I'm the father of 7 children. Harms to children that are being done right now, this is not speculation. This is real. It's happening. And any of you with children or that are watching, what's happening to a whole generation that's being preyed upon by this technology. It's an addictive technology, and I'm talking now social media primarily, that is really rewiring brains and really stealing adolescence from kids. Like, how can we sit back and watching a whole generation become anxious and depressed and have thoughts of suicide? I mean, the statistics are alarming. So there are a few harms right there, but we can fix this.
And just to call out, the infrastructure of the internet has always been decentralized. So really you're talking about the web here when we talk about centralized internet.
Well, I'm sort of. So I'm talking about, the internet when it began as we know it, roughly 1983, with the adoption of some simple thin layer protocols. In this case, it was TCP, IP, which connected devices. And it was designed and built as a decentralized communication system when our government was concerned about the centralized telecommunication system that we had and the fear that it might be disabled by, at the time, the Soviet Union. And if it could disable a centralized hub of telecommunications, we would be without communication. So they asked universities and researchers to get involved to build a decentralized communication system. Again, 1983, these devices adopted this protocol. We had the internet. Decentralized, powerful, awesome technology. 1989, I think it's what you're referring to, which is the web. That's Tim Berners-Lee, another thin layer protocol, HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, that we all adopted. And now we had the data linked up. So devices and data. Now, one footnote here. We are still an IP address on the internet, right? We're not a person. You're not on the internet. Your device is on the internet. So this was a devices, machines, and then data, but still decentralized. The app age changed the intent of the internet and how it operated. And so now we entered a phase of the internet where the game was, now that this data has been freed up, let's build machines, right? Apparatus, platforms that can gather up the data as fast as we can and centralize it, aggregate it, and then we'll figure out how to commercialize it. And so now that's when things got off the rails. And so it's really the user experience as we know it now, which is very app-centric and app-driven, that's changed the original intent of the men and women who created the internet and the World Wide Web.
All right. Throughout the book, you say when we hear the word data, we should actually hear the word personhood. Can you unpack that? What does that mean?
Well, it means that as this app age came upon us, these apps ended up collecting all the information they could about each of us, right? And the term that most of you are familiar with is they began to, collect our personal information, our social graphs, and became the real holy grail of the business was to really map us. So create a human mapped network of all of us, not just our relationships and where we shop or where we physically are, but everything we do in kind of our behaviors, our preferences. And now there's enough information on each of us to predict how we'll react to certain things and how we can be triggered into certain behaviors. So now it's gotten to the point of being a predictive technology that understands and is making judgments about our personality and our emotional makeup. So we're way, way beyond, oh, isn't this cool? I can go buy something and have it delivered to me tomorrow. This is now very exploitive technology, and it's what it's exploiting is us, our information. And the point I make in the book, along with Michael Casey, and I saw him here earlier, so there you are, Michael, and it was a great pleasure to work with you on this, Michael, is that when you begin to understand that what's valuable to these big platforms is our social graph information. That's our personal data. It's not just an abstract thing. It's everything about us. We're not talking about 100 or a few hundred attributes about us. Think tens and hundreds of thousands of attributes about us. And that's what is the value, let's call it, of this aggregated data. And I would argue that this is a value that should be here for society. And what we need to do is, I believe, is add another thin layer protocol, which puts us in charge of the internet. So we own and control our data. And by owning and controlling our personal information, our social graph, we own us. Right now, you don't own you.
So how would that work?
Well, if you think of these relatively thin layer protocols I referred to, one connected the devices, another connected the data. Imagine one that connects us. So it's a thin layer protocol developed by Project Liberty. Two gentlemen, Braxton Woodham and Harry Evans, were the brains behind it, that if adopted at scale would connect all of us. So for the first time, we would actually have a social internet or a socially aware internet, one where we were in charge. So imagine an internet where, and by the way, this is built and used along with TCP/IP and HTTP. So it's not like you're throwing one internet out and you're building another. You're actually creating a very core layer protocol that amends how it works, changes how it works, and actually puts us at the center. So imagine an internet where we're verifiable individuals on the internet. It's just not a complete chaos where anybody can be anybody. You can be as many people as you'd like. It could be a machine spewing out information, this and that. Imagine that there's integrity back in the internet where we are identifiable human beings. You can only be one person. You can control what you reveal about yourself, but you can only be one person. Your social graph is portable. The apps are interoperable. So imagine an internet where the new apps are clicking on our terms of use for our data. We're not clicking on the terms of use of these big platforms. The data is actually part of the internet. Think of it as part of the internet. So it's rather than billions of atomized social graphs that are being vacuumed up by some big platforms, think of it as being a global social graph, universally accessible, where we control our information. So it's maybe oversimplifying what a bit in the interest of time, but it's actually a relatively simple fix to the problem of individuals being abused and taken advantage of. And quite frankly, I go back to this notion that please don't think of it as your data, because that feels like, what's my data? What does it mean? It's think of it as you. It's who you are in a digital era. The internet is something that's not going away. We depend on it. We use it. We're connected to it morning, noon, and night. Let's actually have it be human-centric and human-focused in the first instance, and not be an internet of machines.
We're sitting in a room of people who are either tech ethicists themselves or deeply interested in tech ethics. So it's probably safe to assume that most people here agree with you the internet is broken in the ways that you describe, and that it doesn't have to be that way. But we might also wonder how practical this approach would be and what the adoption might look like.
Well, the reason why Michael and I used Thomas Paine as an inspiration in the book, and Thomas Paine in 1775 wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense. And it was a time when he was actually reaching out to his fellow, they weren't citizens yet, they were settlers, I guess. This was the actual existence of the United States. And he was calling out a question for folks, and he was saying, look, we have a choice to make. We can either continue to be subjects of a monarch and just have few or no human rights, and really just by fate, someone's born into a royal family and they own me, control me, and I get to, in the case of my ancestors, just work the land and maybe keep enough to survive. Or we could be citizens. And with that came a whole list of rights, right, which became known as unalienable rights in our Declaration of Independence. In other words, you're born with it. You have the same rights as the king or the queen, and you're equal. And we can create a government of, by, and for people. We can self-govern. We actually are someone. We have agency. We have autonomy. We have control. We can own things. We can live our life the way we want. We have choice. And this unlocked this country in what was built in a relatively short period of time. An incredible country was built around that premise of liberty, autonomy, individual rights, and by the way, a social contract, which said for those rights to matter, we need to respect those rights in others. And off we went. And this was revolutionary, right? So now we're living in a world where we're seeing massive innovation and strides with technology, which is, quite breathtaking on the one hand, but as fast as the technology is moving in terms of the innovation, we're moving in the opposite direction. We argue in the book when it comes to our rights. We're losing them. We're becoming subjects in the digital world. And we should be digital citizens, not now subjects and owned by these platforms. Why in the world would we exchange all of our rights, everything we love, the health and safety of our kids, the strength and sustainability of a democracy to get to use the internet? Why not have an internet that actually is optimized for the things we want as individuals and society? And this really comes right back to who's in charge, who owns the data we create. And I think this is, and we argue in state in the book, this has become now a human right. Think of it as a human right, not just a digital right, a human right. In this world we live in, your digital DNA, your lived experience, everything about you is part of you as much as your biological DNA is. And by the way, even your biological DNA is now digitized. Okay, so this is our personhood. This is who we are. And if we're going to really, really change what's going on and reclaim, our personhood from the machines of big tech, we need to think of this as a social project, as a political project, not just as a tech project. And that's why Project Liberty has 3 tracks, not just a tech track, although I do think it's an innovation, it's important, and people are now iterating and making it better and better, because without fixing the tech, I don't think we can tackle all the big problems we have. But we also need the social scientists involved, the ethicists, the psychologists, the economists, the policy and governance experts. To this time around, let's not just move fast and break things. Let's move deliberately and fix things.
And how would you envision this shift taking place? Because you're right, it would seem unlikely for the big social companies to begin to work against their own business models.
Yeah, it's unlikely, but so what? Really? I mean, we can all sit back and say, geez, this seems really big. It seems daunting. Well, then our choice is like, we're stuck with it. And so, I just can't see that, honestly. I think we're better than that. And we know that things are not right. And we need to fix this. I don't think there's a bigger issue in our time. I think this is the biggest issue of our time. And sadly, it's not an issue that's being talked about for instance, in this presidential election. It should be the number one issue if we want to really get to the other issues. Unfortunately, we're seeing this same technology, and what it's optimizing for is creating the same dysfunction in our political system. So how do you change it? You change it by getting people involved who care deeply about the issue. That's why I say it's a social project. I don't want to say movement because it sounds like no one creates a movement. Movements happen, And so, but if the tech companies aren't going to change it, and our elected officials aren't going to change it, then it's left to us. It's left to us. So let's just cause the change. It may be moms who just are fed up, who have tragically lost children or are afraid of losing children, that are just saying enough is enough. We're not going to do this. And we have something that looks like the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, that forces this change. It may be people that are concerned about democracy. It may be, people that are concerned about mis and disinformation, or all of the above. This is our lives. Right now, you ask kids, is your life going to be better than your parents'? The majority of kids say, no, I don't believe so. if that isn't like the ultimate metric for failure, our whole lives should be built upon making the world better than we found it, making life better for our children than it was for us. We're failing. We are failing. So we need to fix this. And it's, if we fix it, however, what's available with this technology and the ability of being connected and have access to the data on a permission basis, using it in transparent ways where people actually know what's happening with their data, those kids will be saying, my life is going to be way better than my parents. I'm going to live till I'm 150 and I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And the economics that will be opened up by a new data sharing economy will be massive. The innovators are here. The possibilities are massive. We just need to have the will to change this and really make this a project that's of collective action. And that's just a matter of, do we have the will and the courage? Because there's plenty of means to do this.
Was there a particular moment that drew you into this work? How did you come to be doing this, to found Project Liberty and to write the book?
Well, first of all, I see and feel the same things I think most all of you do, that something is amiss. Something is fundamentally broken. Without getting too carried away about it, I do immediately come to my dinner table growing up. I'm one of 7 children myself, a big Irish family growing up in Boston, and me and my siblings were pretty good at defining problems and complaining, like most kids, right? And not a dinner ended without, my mom saying, okay, you kids have done a good job of defining the problem. Now, what are you going to do about it? And many of us are blessed with parents that said, like, do something. You're capable of doing something, go do something. So it's kind of hardwired. But then I would add to that, I come from a family of builders. My great-great-grandfather started building roads when Henry Ford started building cars. And we've been building infrastructure and designing it for over 130 years. So I'm a 5th generation builder. So come at these things from a problem-solving perspective, as opposed to just a problem complaining perspective. And so I've seen a problem that I can't unsee. And that's where I am.
I want to be conscious of time, and we have a stack of questions from folks in the audience. First one here is from Ken Anthony, who asks, how can tech better support the journey of humans to be more human, not increasingly tied to the latest tech tool?
Let's make the internet a social internet, make it socially aware, give us control and ownership of us, reclaim our personhood, take it back from the machines of big tech, and then build from there.
Kimberly Wright asks, how, if at all, has heritage affected your interest and your position on tech?
Well, I think I just was alluding to that. I mean, we all come from some place with a perspective, and I refer to my mother's dining room table. And yeah, I'm blessed because I come from a family and a heritage of building and problem solving. And, this is, at the end of the day, a infrastructure or engineering problem. And we can fix that. As I said earlier, the bigger challenge, I think, is going to be how do we create momentum around, adopting an alternative to the current internet and really having people understand how they fit in, really. And the reason we wrote the book is really as a call to action. It's only a couple hundred words. The language is intended to be accessible, but I did ask Tim Berners-Lee to read it. And he said, I kept putting red check marks in the margin, agree, 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 agree. So I felt really good about that it's not, Michael, we didn't dumb it down too much. So I think we passed that test.
I read it this weekend. I would agree. It's a quick and easy read and quite interesting. The related question down here, I see Ella Drury asks, do you believe that our technology drives our cultures and norms, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, tech definitely, in my opinion, drives our cultures and norms. We talked a lot about, like, how do we get here? And if you think about it, culture, which is really what houses our norms and our behaviors and our beliefs, really affects kind of who we eventually elect, right, to represent us and what we stand for. and then we expect them to go ahead and put policies and so forth into place. Well, we have arguably the most powerful technology that we've ever had impacting our culture right now, right? It's actually profoundly impacting what is talked about or thought about. And by the way, in a way I just described earlier, in a very manipulative way as well. And we were talking just earlier about the media, went from being one business to something that was just following search engine optimization, right? So it's just what's trending. Well, that doesn't mean that's well-sourced or the most important news. So we really have become almost victims of this omnipresent, ubiquitous technology, which is driving our culture and then everything downstream from that.
So we're getting the sign that we need to wrap this up, but I want to squeeze in a few more questions if we can quickly. When talking about responsible technology, how do you think artificial intelligence can be used responsibly without causing harm to someone's privacy? And this comes from Parth Batavia.
Yeah, I think I hope that you all are reflecting on how important our social graphs, our personal information is to how the internet now is operating. And I say that because we can see now the exploitation and the manipulation and how what was decentralized became centralized, and it's surveillance-based, and it doesn't feel at all like a democratic thing. If I said centralized, surveillance-based, autocratic technology, I don't think you'd say, well, that's a great thing for democracy. So we have this broken thing. We talked about the harms to kids, et cetera, et cetera. So why would we take something broken, make it more powerful using generative AI, large language models, without fixing the problems first? Let's fix the problems and then enjoy the benefits of generative AI. But there's only one reason why we would not fix the problems now knowing that they exist. And that's if we're just going to be dragged into this future by the same companies that are the only companies that can benefit from these large language models, because you need massive data sets and huge compute power that resides in essentially 5 platforms. So for them, I understand why they want to rush and move forward. And you see them all now just frantically, pushing and shoving to see who's going to be the dominant player. But, let's make no mistake about it. This is just a more powerful version of the same thing I've been describing, which is an exploitive technology. What data is being trained in these large language models? It's your data that's being trained. I mean, the static information like books and journals and all that's been ingested by these machines a long time ago. What's being ingested right now is what's on the internet. And without regard to who created it, could care less. It's just ingest all of human creativity right up to the present moment and train models and profit from it. And I'm a capitalist. I'm all for people making profit, but not at the expense of the things I love and the things I care about. So there's a direct correlation between artificial intelligence and our data. And that's what we need to fix. And again, the possibilities are awesome and could be great, but not in the direction we're going.
Thank you, everybody, for all these questions. There's so many great questions that we're not going to get to. But to close on, I think this one is particularly relevant from Dele Atanda. Our biggest fight here may be motivating people to take action to reclaim digital freedom. How do you think we'll achieve this? Do you think we'll achieve this?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not my biggest fight. It's our biggest fight. So I think we'll achieve it if we decide to all really recognize what's at stake and embrace this set of issues and get involved. And so I said earlier that if we don't fix the tech, I don't think we can fix lots of other problems that we have to address in the world. But I also don't believe that fixing the tech alone will solve the problems. We now know how powerful the internet is and what promise it holds. Imagine we get to reset how it works. We get to actually now embed values and principles that weren't embedded in a move fast and break things, kind of era. We get to re-decentralize. We get to put people first, to own and control your data. We get to use the technology for society's sake and optimize for what we all really care about and protect our children and so on and so forth. If we can get kind of the people involved in this to really reclaim our future, then I think we can win this fight. If we just expect new, better tech to do it, I think we lose the fight, because these platforms are so big and powerful that there's only one thing that's going to change, and that's when we insist that it be changed.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. This episode was produced by me and Emma Silikans and mixed by Garrett Lang, with original music from him and Jacob Gorski. Thanks for listening. I'm Jennifer Strong.
From PRX.